Welcome back to Liberty Coin History, the channel where ordinary-looking American coins can lead us into fascinating stories of history, collecting, rarity, and value. Today, we are taking a close look at a coin that many people might completely ignore when they find it in an old collection, a box of change, or tucked away in a drawer. The first coin is 1940 United States wheat penny, especially one in bad, worn, or heavily circulated condition. At first glance, this little 1-cent coin may not look impressive at all. The surface may be dark, scratched, stained, dull, or covered with years of dirt and oxidation. The wheat ears on the reverse may be weak, and parts of the lettering may have suffered from decades of circulation. But before you decide that a coin like this is worthless, stop for a moment. There is an important lesson every collector should remember. A coin's appearance alone does not tell the entire story. The date, mint mark, condition, rarity, errors, varieties, and authenticity can all influence its desirability. So today, we are going on a detailed journey through the 1940 wheat penny, discovering what makes it interesting, what you should look for, and why even a badly worn example deserves a second look. The 1940 Lincoln Wheat cent belongs to one of the most famous series in American numismatics. The Lincoln cent was introduced in 1909, making it one of the longest-running designs in United States coin history. The obverse features the familiar portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, while the reverse carries two wheat ears surrounding the words 1 cent and United States of America, along with the motto EPLURIBUS UNUM. Because of those wheat stalks, collectors commonly call these coins wheat pennies or wheat cents. By 1940, the design had already been familiar to Americans for more than 3 decades. Millions of these small copper coins circulated through stores, banks, pockets, cash registers, and everyday transactions. Imagine the journey of a single 1940 penny. Perhaps it was used to buy candy, carried in a child's pocket, dropped onto a sidewalk, placed into a cash drawer, and eventually forgotten inside an old jar. Every scratch and mark could represent part of that journey. That is one reason coin collecting is so fascinating. You are not simply holding a piece of metal. You may be holding a tiny surviving object from another generation. Now let's talk about the bad condition example featured in today's video. A heavily circulated 1940 wheat penny can look very different from the bright red examples collectors sometimes display in professional holders. The Lincoln portrait may be flattened from years of handling, the hair details can become difficult to see, and the date might have areas of weakness. On the reverse, the wheat ears can appear worn, and the central lettering may show significant circulation damage. Some old pennies may also have dark brown, reddish brown, or nearly black surfaces because copper changes over time. But collectors should be careful about assuming that every dark or dirty coin is rare. Dirt itself generally does not make a coin valuable, and cleaning a coin can actually reduce its desirability. If you discover a 1940 wheat penny, resist the temptation to polish it, scrub it, scrape it, or use household chemicals. What looks like dirt may actually be natural patina, and aggressive cleaning can leave permanent hairline scratches or an unnatural surface. For an old copper coin, original surfaces are often much more desirable than a shiny appearance created by cleaning. One of the first things you should check on a 1940 wheat penny is the mint mark. Look underneath the date on the obverse, near the area where the Lincoln portrait meets the lower part of the coin. Depending on where it was produced, a 1940 Lincoln cent may carry a D mint mark for Denver or an S mint mark for San Francisco, while Philadelphia examples traditionally have no mint mark. This small letter can be extremely important when comparing coins from the same year. However, remember that a mint mark by itself does not automatically make a coin extremely valuable. The total mintage, surviving population, condition, varieties, errors, and current collector demand all matter. A worn 1940 penny with no mint mark is not automatically a fortune, just as a coin with a mint mark is not automatically rare. This is where responsible coin collecting becomes important. Instead of believing every sensational claim about a common penny being worth thousands or millions, collectors should examine the exact coin and compare it with reliable market information and professionally authenticated examples. Another fascinating part of the 1940 wheat penny is its condition. Coin collectors use grading systems to describe how much wear a coin has experienced. A heavily circulated coin might fall into a lower circulated grade, while a coin showing sharp details and little evidence of circulation can receive a much higher grade. The difference can be dramatic. Two coins with the exact same date and mint mark can have very different values because one has spent decades circulating while the other was carefully preserved. On a badly worn example, you may notice that Lincoln's cheek and jaw are smooth, the hair details are weak, and the wheat stalks on the reverse lack sharp definition. That does not make the coin uninteresting. In fact, lower-grade wheat pennies are often excellent starting points for beginners because they allow collectors to study the history and design of the series without spending a fortune. The key is understanding that rarity and condition work together. A common coin in poor condition may have only modest collector value, while a scarce variety or exceptional high-grade example can command substantially more attention. But here is where today's coin hunt becomes especially interesting: errors and varieties. Whenever you examine an old coin, you should look carefully rather than simply checking the date and throwing it into a pile. Look at the lettering, numbers, portrait, rim, and reverse design. Does anything appear unusually doubled? Is there an unusual shape to a letter or digit? Is the rim abnormal? Does the coin appear to have been struck off-center? Are there signs of a genuine minting error rather than ordinary damage? These are questions that can turn an ordinary-looking coin into a research project. However, there is a major difference between a genuine mint error and damage that happened after the coin left the mint. Scratches, dents, cuts, flattened edges, corrosion, and damage from machinery can create unusual appearances that are not valuable mint errors. This is why collectors should never assume that every strange-looking feature is rare. If you believe your 1940 penny has an unusual variety or error, compare it with trusted references and, for potentially valuable pieces, consider professional authentication. There is also something special about the historical period surrounding 1940. The United States was entering a dramatically changing era. World events were transforming economies, industries, families, and daily life. A 1940 Lincoln cent was produced during a time when the United States was still using the traditional copper composition associated with Lincoln cents of that era. Within only a few years, the composition of the cent would change dramatically because of wartime material demands. That makes pre-war wheat cents particularly interesting from a historical perspective. When you hold a 1940 penny, you are holding a small piece of the monetary system used by Americans before and during one of the most consequential periods of the 20th century. The coin itself is tiny, but its historical context is enormous. This is one reason collectors continue to search through old wheat cents decades after they disappeared from regular circulation. Now let's discuss the question that almost every viewer is waiting for. How much could a 1940 wheat penny in bad condition actually be worth? The honest answer is that there is no single price that applies to every example. A heavily worn 1940 Lincoln cent without an important variety or error is generally not the type of coin that should automatically be described as a multi-thousand-dollar treasure. Its value depends on factors such as the mint mark, grade, originality, eye appeal, and demand. Some circulated examples may trade for only a modest premium over face value, while better preserved pieces can be more desirable to collectors. Exceptional coins, certified examples, or unusual varieties can be a completely different story. This is an important point for our Liberty coin history viewers. Never judge a coin's value from a viral headline alone. Auction records can represent exceptional examples, and a record price for one coin does not mean every coin of the same date is worth that amount. Always compare the specific condition and characteristics of your own coin. If your 1940 wheat penny is extremely dirty, you may be wondering whether you should clean it before selling or showing it to a collector. Please think twice before doing that. Cleaning an old copper coin can permanently alter its surface and may make it less attractive to experienced collectors. A coin that looks dull or dark may have developed natural tunning over many decades. Even if you dislike the appearance, that original surface can be part of the coin's history. Instead of using abrasive materials, metal polish, vinegar, strong chemicals, or tools, simply handle the coin carefully by its edges and keep it in a safe, non-damaging holder. If the coin has loose dirt, avoid aggressive rubbing. If you think you have something genuinely rare, professional advice is much safer than experimenting at home. Remember, you cannot easily undo damage caused by cleaning. Once the original surface has been scratched or chemically altered, the coin cannot simply be returned to its original condition. Another important lesson from this 1940 wheat penny is the difference between face value, collector value, and exceptional auction value. Face value is the denomination printed into the monetary system, in this case, 1 cent. Collector value is what someone may actually be willing to pay for a particular example based on its characteristics and demand. Exceptional auction value can occur when a coin combines rarity, extraordinary preservation, provenance, and strong competition between bidders. These are not the same thing. A worn 1940 penny found in a jar should not automatically be valued like a spectacular professionally graded specimen. At the same time, you should never assume that an old coin has no collector interest simply because it is worn. Collectors build sets at many grade levels, and affordable circulated examples remain part of the hobby. The most important thing is accurate identification. Know your date, check your mint mark, examine the condition, and look for legitimate varieties before deciding what you have. So if you discover a 1940 wheat penny in bad condition, what should you actually do? First, carefully identify the date and confirm that it really reads 1940. Next, check whether there is a mint mark beneath the date. Then examine both sides under good lighting. Look closely at Lincoln's portrait, the lettering, the date, the rim, and the wheat stalks. Take note of any unusual doubling, missing details, abnormal shapes, or possible minting anomalies. After that, compare the coin with reliable references and recent sales of similar examples. If the coin appears unusually rare or valuable, professional grading and authentication may be worth considering. And remember that photographs can sometimes be misleading, especially when lighting makes normal wear look like an error. The more carefully you examine a coin, the better your chances of separating an ordinary old penny from an example that deserves closer attention. There's another reason I love coins like this one. They encourage people to look at history differently. A 1940 wheat penny might be badly worn, stained, scratched, and almost forgotten, yet it survived for more than 80 years. Think about how many modern objects from 1940 have disappeared completely. A tiny copper cent can outlive the people who originally used it and travel through generations of families before finally landing in the hands of a collector. That is the magic of numismatics. You do not need a perfect coin to appreciate its story. Sometimes the most worn coin in an old collection can start the most interesting conversation. Maybe it came from a grandparent's collection. Maybe it was discovered in an inherited box. Maybe it was pulled from an old roll of cents. Its monetary value might be modest, but its historical and sentimental value could be meaningful. Every wheat penny is a small survivor from America's past. And now, before we finish this fascinating journey through the 1940 United States wheat penny, remember the biggest lesson. Never throw away an old coin without checking it first. A badly conditioned coin may not be $1 million treasure, but it can still have collector interest, historical importance, or an unusual characteristic worth researching. Check the date, check the mint mark, study the surfaces, avoid cleaning, and learn how genuine errors and varieties are identified. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the 1940 wheat penny, make sure you are subscribed to Liberty Coin History, turn on notifications, and join us for more discoveries involving old American coins. And tell us in the comments, have you ever found a 1940 wheat penny and what condition was it in? Was it bright, brown, dirty, scratched, or heavily worn? Now let's move on to the second coin in today's Liberty Coin History investigation, the 1942 United States wheat penny. At first glance, this coin may look like nothing more than an old, heavily circulated 1-cent piece, especially if the example you have is dirty, dark, scratched, or badly worn. But remember, this coin was struck more than 8 decades ago, and it comes from one of the most historically important periods in American history. The 1942 Lincoln Wheat Penny was produced while the United States was deeply involved in the events surrounding World War II, making this little copper cent a fascinating survivor from an extraordinary era. When you find one in poor condition, it can be tempting to ignore it because the details may be weak and the surface may not look attractive. But experienced collectors know that the first step is never to judge an old coin simply by its appearance. Instead, identify the date, inspect the mint mark, study the surfaces, and determine whether there is anything unusual that could make the coin more interesting to collectors. The 1942 wheat penny carries the classic Lincoln cent design that collectors around the world recognize immediately. On the front is the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, with the date 1942 positioned beneath his image. On the reverse are the famous 2 wheat ears surrounding the denomination, and the words United States of America, along with the motto EPLURIBUS UNUM. This design had been circulating since 1909, meaning that by 1942 Americans had already been using Lincoln wheat cents for more than 30 years. Imagine this particular coin entering circulation during wartime America. It could have passed through a grocery store, a gas station, a bank, a factory, or a family household. It may have been carried in someone's pocket during a time when millions of Americans were experiencing enormous changes in their daily lives. Every scratch and mark on a worn example is part of its physical journey through history. One of the most important things to examine on your 1942 wheat penny is the mint mark. Look below the date on the obverse. A 1942 cent may have no mint mark, indicating Philadelphia, or it may carry a D for Denver or an S for San Francisco. This tiny letter can make a significant difference when researching and comparing coins. However, don't make the mistake of assuming that the presence of a mint mark automatically means your coin is extremely rare or worth a huge amount of money. The value of any particular coin depends on several factors, including mintage, surviving examples, condition, varieties, errors, and collector demand. If your 1942 penny is in bad condition, the mint mark is especially worth checking because it gives you another important piece of information about the coin's origin. Use good lighting and, if necessary, a magnifying glass, but avoid damaging the coin while trying to read the tiny details. Now take a close look at the condition of this second coin. A badly worn 1942 wheat penny may have a smooth Lincoln portrait, weak hair details, faded lettering, and a date that is less sharply defined than it was when the coin left the mint. The reverse can show heavy wear across the wheat stalks, the words 1 cent, and the surrounding lettering. The color may range from reddish-brown to dark brown, and some examples may have accumulated dirt or environmental staining during their long lives. But don't confuse wear with rarity. A damaged or heavily circulated coin isn't automatically valuable just because it is old. At the same time, don't assume that poor condition means the coin has no significance. Collectors often collect wheat cents in circulated grades because they are affordable, and because they provide an opportunity to build complete Daytan mint mark collections. The important question is what exact 1942 coin you have, and whether it contains any unusual characteristics. The historical background of 1942 makes this coin especially fascinating. The United States had entered World War II following the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. During 1942, American society and industry were rapidly changing as the country mobilized for war. Factories were producing military equipment, families were dealing with shortages and rationing, and millions of Americans were contributing to the war effort in different ways. Your 1942 wheat penny was produced during this extraordinary period. That doesn't automatically make every 1942 cent rare, but it gives the coin a powerful historical connection. When you hold one, you are holding a piece of America's everyday monetary history from the early years of the Second World War. This is one reason wheat pennies remain so popular even when individual examples are heavily worn. There is also a fascinating connection between wartime America and the composition of United States cents. The 1942 cent belongs to the traditional bronze Lincoln Wheat cent era. But as the war continued, the United States Mint began looking for ways to conserve important materials for military production. This eventually led to the famous 1943 steel cents, which replaced the normal bronze composition for that year. That means the 1942 wheat penny sits directly before one of the most unusual chapters in Lincoln cent history. The 1943 steel cent is famous because it looks completely different from the normal copper-colored wheat penny. Understanding that transition helps explain why collectors are so interested in Lincoln cents from the early 1940s. The 1942 coin is not merely another old penny. It is part of the fascinating story of how American coinage changed during wartime. Now, if your 1942 wheat penny is extremely dirty, you may be wondering whether cleaning it could make it more valuable. Do not rush to clean it. Old copper coins can be easily damaged by polishing, rubbing, scraping, or chemical treatments. What looks like dirt may sometimes be natural tunning or surface oxidation that developed over many decades. Cleaning can create visible scratches and an unnatural appearance that experienced collectors may immediately notice. Instead, handle the coin by its edges and store it safely in an appropriate holder. If you want to photograph it, use good lighting and take pictures of both sides. A coin that looks unattractive to a casual observer may still be useful for a collection, especially if it has an interesting date, mint mark, variety, or historical connection. As you inspect the 1942 cent, don't forget to look for possible mint errors and varieties. Examine the date carefully. Study the lettering on both sides. Look at the rim and the overall shape of the coin. Is the strike centered? Does anything appear doubled in a way that could potentially indicate a genuine doubled die? Are there unusual features that seem to have been created during the minting process rather than through damage after circulation? These questions can lead to exciting discoveries. However, collectors must be cautious because ordinary damage can imitate valuable errors. A scratch through a number isn't necessarily a double digit, and a flattened area on the rim isn't necessarily a mint error. Genuine varieties and errors require careful comparison, and in some cases, professional examination. Never assume a coin is rare simply because it looks strange. So, what about the value of a 1942 wheat penny? This is where we need to separate realistic collecting information from sensational internet claims. A normal, heavily circulated 1942 cent without a major variety or error generally isn't something you should automatically expect to sell for thousands or millions of dollars. Its collector value can be modest, and it depends heavily on the exact mint mark and condition. Higher-grade examples can be considerably more desirable, while exceptional certified specimens may bring stronger prices. Rare varieties and genuine mint errors can also change the situation. The important point is that there is no universal price for every 1942 wheat penny. The same date can have dramatically different values depending on preservation and other characteristics. Before assigning a price, identify the exact coin and compare it with reliable references and actual sales of comparable examples. For beginners, the 1942 wheat penny is actually a wonderful coin to study because it teaches several important principles of coin collecting. You learn how to identify the date, how to locate a mint mark, how to evaluate wear, how to recognize natural tunning, and how to distinguish post-mint damage from possible mint errors. You also learn the importance of historical context. Instead of simply asking, "How much is this penny worth?" you can ask, "Where was it made? How many were produced? How many survive? What condition is it in? Does it have an unusual variety? What has happened to collector demand?" Those questions lead to much better answers. Coin collecting is not simply about finding expensive objects. It is about research, observation, history, and learning how to recognize details that most people overlook. If you have a 1942 wheat penny sitting in an old jar or collection, take a few minutes to examine it carefully. Check whether it has a D mint mark, an S mint mark, or no mint mark. Look at the date and make sure the numbers are genuine and haven't been altered. Examine Lincoln's portrait and the wheat ears on the reverse. Check the rim and surfaces for unusual features. If the coin has been heavily circulated, don't be disappointed. Many historic coins survive in poor condition, and even a worn example can be an interesting addition to a collection. If you believe yours has a legitimate error or unusual variety, consider getting a knowledgeable numismatist or professional grading service to examine it rather than relying solely on online photographs or viral claims. And there you have it, the second coin in our Liberty coin history journey, the 1942 Lincoln Wheat Penny. This little 1-cent coin may be worn, dirty, scratched, or badly circulated, but it still carries the story of an important moment in American history. Its value should be determined by its actual characteristics rather than exaggerated headlines. So before you spend, clean, or discard an old wheat penny, take a closer look. You never know what detail might send you on an exciting research journey. We are continuing our journey with the third coin in our collection, the 1945 United States wheat penny. At first glance, this 1945 Lincoln wheat cent may look ordinary, especially if the example in your collection is badly worn, dark, scratched, dirty, or heavily circulated. But don't let its rough appearance fool you into thinking there is nothing interesting to discover. This coin was struck during one of the most important years in American history, the final year of World War II. That historical connection alone makes the 1945 wheat penny fascinating to collectors. But beyond history, there are also important details to examine, including the mint mark, condition, possible varieties, and potential errors. So before you put that old penny back into a jar or spend it without a second thought, let's take a closer look at what makes the 1945 wheat penny worth investigating. The 1945 Lincoln Wheat Penny carries the classic design that made the series one of the most recognizable coins in American history. On the obverse, you can see the portrait of President Abraham Lincoln, along with the inscription Liberty and the date 1945. On the reverse, two wheat ears frame the words 1 cent and United States of America, with the traditional motto, EPLURIBUS, UNUM above them. This design had been used for decades by the time the 1945 cent was produced. Millions of Americans were familiar with these coins, and they passed through everyday commerce during a period when the entire country was focused on the war effort. Your particular penny may have been used by a worker, a soldier's family, a shopkeeper, or a child. We cannot know its exact journey, but the worn surfaces tell us one thing for certain. This tiny piece of metal survived decades of use and remained in existence long after the people who originally handled it were gone. One of the first things every collector should check on a 1945 wheat penny is the mint mark. Look directly below the date on the obverse. Depending on where it was produced, the coin may have no mint mark, a D mint mark for Denver, or an S mint mark for San Francisco. This tiny letter can be extremely important when researching your coin because coins from different mints can have different production numbers and collector demand. But remember, A mint mark alone does not make a coin a fortune. You need to consider the complete combination of date, mint, condition, varieties, errors, and authenticity. If your coin is badly worn, the mint mark might be difficult to see, so use good lighting and examine the area carefully. Never scratch or scrape the surface in an attempt to make the letter clearer. Protecting the original surface is far more important than forcing a detail to appear. Now let's talk about the condition of the 1945 penny. A heavily circulated example may have lost much of the original detail that was present when it left the United States Mint. Lincoln's hair may appear smooth, his cheek may show extensive wear, and the lines around his ear can be difficult to distinguish. The reverse can show flattened wheat stalks and weakened lettering. A dark brown or reddish-brown appearance is also common on older copper cents. Some examples may have surface discoloration from years of storage or exposure to the environment. But here's something important for every new collector. Don't assume that a dirty or worn coin is automatically rare. Dirt and damage don't create rarity. At the same time, don't throw away a worn wheat penny simply because it isn't shiny. Circulated wheat cents are still collected, and a coin with an unusual variety, scarce mint combination, or genuine error can deserve additional attention regardless of its appearance. The year 1945 itself makes this coin historically remarkable. It was the final year of World War II, a conflict that had transformed the United States and the world. In 1945, American factories were still producing enormous quantities of military equipment. Millions of service members were involved in the war, and families across the country were waiting and hoping for the conflict to end. The war in Europe ended in May 1945, while the war in the Pacific continued until later that year. During this extraordinary period, ordinary coins like the Lincoln cent were still being used in everyday transactions. A 1945 wheat penny therefore represents more than a denomination. It is a physical connection to the final months of one of the most consequential events of the 20th century. When you hold one today, you're holding something that circulated through an America that was very different from the country we know now. The 1945 cent also belongs to the fascinating wartime era of Lincoln cents. During the war, the United States Mint made major changes to cent production because certain metals were needed for military purposes. The famous 1943 steel cent is the best-known example of this wartime experiment. By 1944, the mint had returned to a bronze composition using recycled materials that included metal recovered from spent ammunition shell casings. By 1945, these bronze-colored Lincoln cents were once again part of everyday American commerce. This makes the 1945 penny an interesting companion to the famous 1943 steel cent. Collectors who study Lincoln cents from this period can see how world events influenced the physical coins produced by the United States Mint. It is a remarkable reminder that even something as ordinary as a penny can reflect major changes in national history. Now, if your 1945 wheat penny looks particularly strange, take a closer look before deciding what you're seeing. Mint errors and varieties can sometimes attract significant collector interest, but genuine examples must be distinguished from ordinary damage. Examine the date, lettering, rim, portrait, and wheat ears. Look for unusual doubling, off-center striking, clipped areas, abnormal rims, or other characteristics that appear to have occurred during the minting process. But be careful. A coin that has been scratched, squeezed, hit, scraped, or damaged by machinery after leaving the mint can look very unusual without being a valuable mint error. This is one of the biggest challenges for beginners. The internet contains many photographs of supposed errors, but not every unusual-looking coin is rare. If you think your 1945 cent has something extraordinary, compare it with trusted numismatic references and consider professional examination before making a major valuation claim. Another major question is the value of a 1945 wheat penny in bad condition. The honest answer is that you should not automatically expect a worn 1945 cent to be worth hundreds, thousands, or millions of dollars. Most ordinary circulated examples do not command spectacular prices simply because they are old. Their value depends on the exact mint mark, grade, originality, variety, and current collector demand. Better preserved coins can be significantly more desirable, and exceptional certified examples can bring much stronger prices than ordinary circulated pieces. Rare varieties and genuine errors can also change the equation. This is why the exact coin matters. A headline claiming that a particular wheat penny sold for an enormous amount may refer to an extremely rare, high-grade, or unusual specimen. That does not mean every 1945 penny has the same value. Always compare your coin with similar examples rather than relying on the highest number you see online. If your 1945 penny is covered with dirt, please don't clean it aggressively. This is one of the most important pieces of advice we can give at Liberty Coin History. Scrubbing an old copper cent with a cloth, brush, metal polish, vinegar, chemicals, or other household products can leave permanent damage. Collectors often prefer original surfaces, even when those surfaces are dark or naturally toned. A cleaned coin can develop unnatural brightness and visible scratches that reduce its appeal. Instead, handle your penny carefully by the edges and place it in a suitable holder designed for coin storage. If you want to photograph it, use natural or neutral lighting and take clear images of both sides. If you believe the coin might have significant value, professional evaluation is a much safer choice than attempting to restore the coin yourself. For anyone building a wheat penny collection, the 1945 issue can be an excellent coin to study. It teaches you how to identify mint marks, recognize circulated grades, understand historical context, and distinguish ordinary ware from potentially unusual characteristics. You can also compare your 1945 cent with other wheat pennies from the 1940s and see how the design and surfaces change depending on condition. Look at the strength of Lincoln's portrait, the sharpness of the wheat ears, the lettering, the date, and the rim. Over time, your eyes become trained to notice small differences. That is one of the most rewarding aspects of collecting. You don't need to begin with expensive coins. You can start with inexpensive circulated pieces and gradually learn the skills that experienced numismatists use when examining much more valuable coins. So if you have a 1945 wheat penny sitting in an old collection, don't ignore it. Take it out carefully and examine both sides. Confirm the date, check for a D or S mint mark, inspect the condition, and look for legitimate varieties or errors. If it is badly worn, that doesn't necessarily make it worthless. It simply means the coin's condition is one of the factors that must be considered when determining its collector value. And remember that historical value and monetary value are not always the same thing. A worn 1945 cent may not be worth a fortune, but it can still be an incredible piece of World War II-era American history. Sometimes the story behind a coin is just as fascinating as the price it might bring. And now we've reached the end of our investigation of the third coin, the 1945 Lincoln Wheat Penny. From its connection to the final year of World War II to its classic Lincoln design and the possibility of different mint marks and varieties, this tiny 1-cent coin has a lot more to offer than its size suggests. If you have enjoyed this episode of Liberty Coin History, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share this video with another coin collector. And don't forget to leave a comment telling us what your 1945 wheat penny looks like. Is it heavily worn, dark and dirty? Does it have a D, an S, or no mint mark? You might be surprised by how many other collectors have similar coins. As always, remember that coin values vary based on authenticity, grade, condition, mint mark, rarity, varieties, errors, eye appeal, market conditions, and collector demand. We have reached the fourth coin in our journey, the 1945 D Lincoln Wheat Penny. This coin deserves special attention because the small letter D beneath the date tells us that this particular wheat cent was produced at the Denver Mint. At first glance, especially if the coin is in bad condition, dark, scratched, stained, or heavily circulated, it may look like an ordinary old penny that has little left to offer. But this is exactly why experienced collectors take their time before making a judgment. An old coin should be examined carefully from every angle. The date, mint mark, condition, surfaces, varieties, and possible errors all contribute to the story of the piece. A 1945 D wheat penny also comes from the final year of World War II, giving it an incredible historical connection. So today, let's slow down, examine this fourth coin carefully, and discover what makes the 1945 D wheat penny interesting to collectors. The 1945 D Lincoln Wheat cent features the familiar portrait of Abraham Lincoln on the obverse. You can see the word Liberty near the upper left side of the portrait, the date 1945 below Lincoln, and most importantly for today's coin, the letter D beneath the date. On the reverse are the two famous wheat ears that gave this series its nickname. Between the wheat stalks are the words 1 cent and United States of America, while EPLURIBUS UNUM appears above. The design itself had already been part of American life for decades by 1945. Millions of people had used Lincoln Wheat cents in everyday transactions, and this particular coin was created during a time when the nation was still fighting a global war. Even if the coin in front of you is heavily worn, its design connects it directly to an important chapter of American history. The D mint mark is one of the first details you should confirm. Carefully look beneath the date and make sure the letter really is a D on a heavily circulated coin. The mint mark can be difficult to read because decades of wear may flatten the details. Dirt, corrosion, scratches, and environmental damage can also make the area confusing. Use good lighting and, if necessary, a magnifying glass, but never scrape the coin with a sharp object to make the mint mark clearer. You could permanently damage the surface and destroy important evidence. Once you've confirmed the D, you know you're looking at a Denver Mint issue. This is important because collectors organize Lincoln Wheat cents by date and mint mark, and different mint issues can have different production figures and levels of demand. Now let's talk about the condition of this 1945 D wheat penny. If your example is in bad condition, you may notice that Lincoln's hair details are weak, his cheek and jaw are smooth, and the lettering may be partially worn. The reverse wheat ears may also appear flat, with some of the finer lines nearly disappearing. The color may be dark brown, reddish brown, or uneven because copper naturally changes over time. There may also be scratches, small dents, stains, or environmental damage. None of these features should automatically be interpreted as signs of rarity. Heavy circulation simply tells us that the coin spent a long time in use. But condition still matters because collectors generally place greater value on coins with stronger original details and fewer distracting problems. The important thing is to describe the coin honestly. A heavily worn coin can still be historically fascinating, even when its monetary value is modest. The year 1945 adds another layer to the story. This was the final year of World War II, a period when American society was undergoing enormous changes. The United States had been fighting on multiple fronts. Factories were producing supplies for the military, families were dealing with rationing and shortages, and millions of service members were involved in the conflict. In Europe, the war ended in May 1945, while fighting in the Pacific continued until later that year. Somewhere during this extraordinary period, your 1945 D wheat penny entered circulation. It could have traveled through a Denver business, a grocery store, a bank, a household, or countless other places before eventually becoming a collector's coin. That historical journey is one of the most exciting things about old United States coins. A tiny cent can provide a physical connection to people and events that happened more than 80 years ago. The 1945 D cent also belongs to an especially interesting period in the history of Lincoln cent composition. During World War II, the United States Mint had to conserve materials that were important to the war effort. This led to the famous 1943 steel cents, which replaced the normal bronze composition for 1 year. In 1944, the mint returned to bronze cents, including cents made using copper recovered from spent ammunition shell casings. By 1945, the familiar bronze-colored Lincoln cent was once again being produced. This makes the 1945 D wheat penny part of a fascinating sequence of wartime coinage. If you compare a 1945 cent with a 1943 steel cent, the difference can be dramatic. The 1945 D may look like an ordinary brown copper coin, but its place in this wartime timeline makes it an interesting piece for collectors who enjoy both numismatics and history. Now here's where your examination becomes especially important. Look for unusual characteristics. Study the date and mint mark closely. Examine the lettering, the portrait, the wheat ears, and the rim. Could there be doubling? Is the coin struck off-center? Is there an unusual rim or another feature that appears to have happened during the minting process? Genuine mint errors can be collectible, sometimes very collectible, but you must be careful. Many strange-looking features are simply the result of damage that happened after the coin left the mint. Scratches, dents, cuts, machine damage, corrosion, and impacts can create shapes that resemble errors. A true mint error requires careful identification and often professional confirmation. So if something about your 1945 D cent looks unusual, don't immediately assume you've discovered a rare fortune. Take photographs, compare the coin with reliable references, and seek expert assistance if the feature appears significant. Another important issue is cleaning. If your 1945 D wheat penny is extremely dirty, you might think that polishing it would make it more attractive and therefore more valuable. Unfortunately, that can have the opposite effect. Aggressive cleaning can scratch the surface of copper, remove natural tunning, and leave an unnatural appearance that collectors may dislike. Household chemicals can also alter the coin's surface. Instead of trying to make your old penny look brand new, preserve it as you found it. Handle it by the edges, avoid unnecessary rubbing, and store it in a proper coin holder. Remember that the coin has survived for more than 80 years. Its original surface, even if dark or imperfect, is part of its history. If you believe the coin may be unusually valuable, professional evaluation is a much better option than attempting restoration at home. Now comes the question everyone wants answered. What is a 1945 D wheat penny worth? The answer depends entirely on the individual coin. A heavily circulated, ordinary example should not automatically be described as a coin worth thousands or millions of dollars. Its value may be relatively modest, particularly if it has significant wear or damage. However, better preserved examples can attract more collector interest, and exceptional certified pieces can be worth substantially more than ordinary circulated coins. Genuine errors and recognized varieties can also change the value dramatically. This is why responsible coin collecting requires specific identification rather than sensational claims. If you see a headline saying a 1945 D penny is worth an enormous amount, remember that such a price may relate to an extraordinary example in exceptional condition or with a rare characteristic. It does not mean every 1945 D wheat penny has that value. For collectors building a complete Lincoln Wheat cent collection, the 1945 D can be an interesting addition. One of the best ways to learn about coin collecting is to compare several examples of the same date and mint mark in different conditions. Put a heavily circulated 1945 D next to a sharper example and examine the differences. Look at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jawline, the lettering, the date, and the wheat stalks. On the reverse, notice how circulation gradually removes the finer details. This exercise helps you understand grading without relying only on numbers or labels. Over time, your eyes become trained to recognize differences between heavily worn, moderately circulated, and well-preserved coins. That's one of the skills that separates casual searching from serious collecting. So if you've discovered a 1945 D wheat penny in poor condition, don't throw it away just because it looks rough. Confirm the date, verify the D mint mark, examine both sides, and check for anything unusual. If there are scratches or damage, recognize them for what they are rather than automatically calling them errors. If the coin appears unusually well preserved or contains a legitimate variety, further research may be worthwhile. Even when the monetary value is modest, the coin still represents Denver mint production during the final year of World War II. That alone makes it an interesting historical object. The beauty of coin collecting is that value isn't always measured in dollars. Sometimes a coin becomes special because of its age, its story, its connection to history, or the memories attached to the person who found it. And that brings us to the end of our investigation of the fourth coin, the 1945 D Lincoln Wheat Penny. This small cent may have spent decades in circulation, suffered wear, picked up dirt, and lost much of its original detail, but it still carries the unmistakable story of America during the final year of World War II. The D mint mark connects it to Denver, the wheat cent design connects it to generations of American commerce, and its 1945 date connects it to one of the most important years of the 20th century. If you enjoyed this episode of Liberty Coin History, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications, and share it with fellow coin collectors. Tell us in the comments whether you have a 1945 D wheat penny and what condition yours is in. And remember, coin values can vary significantly based on authenticity, grade, condition, mint mark, rarity, varieties, errors, eye appeal, and current collector demand.